Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Hey. Welcome to our panel talk on industry and Jack London. Just a quick show of hands. Who is in the industrial sphere? Who works in what we would consider industry? Waste management? Yes. I know there's a few more of you. Steve Lowe? Yes. Yes. Wow, so, and the folks on stage, and Fathom, which we're going to hear from soon, our generous hosts this evening. So tonight we're going to talk a bit about industry in Jack London. There's a lot of discussion about the future of the city right now with the downtown specific plan going on. And Jack London is really traditionally industrial. It is Oakland's historic working waterfront. But that industry has looked really different over the last 100 years. And even the building that we're in today used to be a foundry, and then it was a number of different industrial uses. Then it was Marcus Ace Hardware, and then it was, anybody? A popular music venue? Oh, the Oakland Metro Opera House. And today it will be, again, an industrial use. It will be the expanded home of Fathom. And we're going to hear a little bit more about Fathom tonight. And actually, can I hand you this mic, and we'll hear a bit from Silos. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Silas. I'm here representing Fathom. We're a 3D printing and advanced manufacturer based right here in Jack London Square. We recently annexed the Opera House, and we're looking to move in here by the end of Q3, so we're rapidly expanding. We typically work with design and engineering firms and a lot of hardware startups, and we're just really excited to be a part of the Jack London community. So we think everything that's going on here is great, and we're glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, the point of this discussion is to learn a little bit about the industries that are operating here in the area. Why do they operate in Oakland? What can Oakland do to support that industry? And what's the future going to look like a little bit? And each of these panelists has a pretty different perspective and different role in industry. And I'll give them a very quick introduction, if that's okay with them. And I'll pass this on to our esteemed moderator, Egon, and with a quick introduction. So Gurmeet Narula is the head of business development and strategic partnerships at Gen Z Mahindra, with significant experience in electric vehicles and automotive technology, solar technology, electric contact manufacturing, has held senior positions at SunPower, Apple, Sanmina, and is author of The Entrepreneurial Connection. Did I get that right? Jeff Williams is founder and CTO of CodeShelf, which has a radically different vision for warehouse automation. He is a computer scientist by education and has worked with large companies from Coca-Cola to Matson Logistics, and continues to rack up patents and patent applications. Is that accurate? And Steve Schaefer and his wife Marilee are owner and winemaker of Urban Legend Cellars, and they're redefining terroir with neighborhood-themed wines such as the Ironworks, which is the neighborhood we're in right now, and West O. Steve is also an engineer, so I don't know if that's also why he's here, but he also holds patents in computer system and fiber optic networking. That's very interesting. And Egon Terplin is Spur's regional planning director. He has authored or co-authored dozens of reports and policy studies, including the first ever report on Northern California megaregion and strategies for the future of downtown Oakland. So thank you all for being here, and I will turn it over to Egon.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Savlan, for having me. I am not an engineer. I have no patents, so I'm happy to be up here with some gentlemen that have designed things, made things, and as Savlan said, I work for an organization called Spur, which is based in the 3 central cities of the Bay Area, and we've been in Oakland now for a little over a year, and I authored a report we did on downtown Oakland called A Downtown for Everyone, and part of the idea of that is really downtowns are very special places that can accommodate all kinds of people, all kinds of uses, and when we say everyone, a piece of that is a wide range of companies, industries, occupations, and clearly what we're talking about here in Jack London, industrial uses is an important part of a greater downtown, though it's not something you see in all downtowns throughout the United States. There's been many changes in what happens at the edges of downtowns over the years, and here we are sitting in Jack London Square, an area that hasn't been rezoned, I believe, since 1960. So in the specific plan that the city has begun right now, they're really starting from scratch of what is this place going to look like in the future. So the sets of decisions that come from that plan and that planning process is really going to lay the opportunity, limit it, open them up, depending on how it moves forward, for a whole wide range of activities. So I think what we really want to hear tonight, principally, is your stories as entrepreneurs, your stories as individuals, why are you here? But then we want to maybe get a little bit into a broader conversation, both around policy and planning. What can planning tools do to make your company remain here, other companies like you join here, but also the economic development story around what really makes companies, a kind of cluster of firms within a place, really grow and create employment and the other co-benefits of that. So what I'd love to do is maybe have one of you jump in, tell a little bit, what's your story? Why are you here? What's the company you do? I think people would love to hear what's the company you work on, what industry you're in, and I'm not going to call on one of you, but one of you just kind of jump in and tell a little bit about your particular story, and then we can hear from each of you and then open it up to a broader conversation.
You want to go or should I go for it?
You take it off.
Okay, guys, I see a lot of empty glasses here. No. So thanks, folks. So have you guys seen the bike solar charging station at Jack London Square? I mean, right here, improvement. So check it out. So that's our commitment. We've already got a product here. It's a solar bike charging system using electric vehicles, right? It's about a couple of blocks from here. So I'm with a company called Gen Z, which is Generation Zero Emissions. We're an electric vehicle startup in Silicon Valley, but we are kind of funded by our parent company, which is Mahindra. It's an Indian company out of Bombay, $20 billion annual revenues, so a large company. And one of the largest, it is the largest manufacturer of tractors in the world, ahead of John Deere in quantity, in numbers. Right, so we're a sizable company, very committed to electric vehicles. We raced last weekend at San Diego. Our Formula E racing car was there. So we're one of the 10 companies with Formula E racing. We have an electric car, electric scooter, electric bike. Our electric scooters and bikes are designed and manufactured in the US, Detroit. So we have a large manufacturing facility there. So, and we are incredibly active in the Bay Area, right? We got introduced to Oakland by a very close friend of mine called Danny Kennedy. How many of you guys know Danny Kennedy? So Danny is the founder of Sungevity, the solar company. He's an amazing guy, down to earth, really cool, Australian, right? So he introduced us to Matt Nichols, who is the Director of Transportation for Oakland. We actually launched that solar charging station, I think a couple of months ago, with Mayor Libby Schaaf, the chairman of Mahindra. He flew down here. We had the mayor of Fremont and a couple of other folks. So we actually launched it here on City Hall footsteps, right? So that's our frickin' commitment to Oakland, right? We are committed here, right? So I just want to share a few more points, if you don't mind. Yeah, I hope this. Okay, but I have insurance, so I'm okay. So anyway, so I have been in the Silicon Valley for a while, 25 years, and I've done multiple startups here. Worked for Apple, as Savlan said, worked at SunPower, photovoltaic, and then, recently helping Gen Z and a company in EV charging space. So when I came from India here, I was like, wow, all this is amazing renaissance of entrepreneurship. And I said, I wanted to learn about it. So I interviewed 20 folks in Silicon Valley, Boston, and Bangalore. It's the Indian hub. The CEOs of these companies, very large companies and startups, on what makes Silicon Valley work, what's the secret, blah, 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 right? And my learning in that was there are 4 ingredients of Silicon Valley, right? IC, VC, SC, CC. Anybody want to take a guess what those 4 things are? And I'll buy you wine. Yeah. So IC, intellectual capital. VC, venture capital. SC, support capital. CC, culture capital. So imagine one of them is the seed, the other is the soil, then you have the water, plant, and out comes the fruit, right? So the IC, VC, SC, CC working around. So we are very, very passionate about this area, Oakland, right? In fact, we want to set up a manufacturing facility, et cetera, et cetera. But our suggestions and some of the questions. So IC means the leading universities' intellectual capital. Now, does Oakland have a leading university? Yeah, but that's not Oakland, right? Oakland. Does Oakland have a university, leading university? So food for thought. As Oakland is positioned for a phenomenal trajectory rise, right? It's the sunny side, right? Absolutely, brilliant. In fact, Savlan and I were talking earlier. A good idea would be to set up, hubs or innovation centers, or even, offshoots of. Absolutely. So, for example, in Mountain View, NASA, you have Carnegie. I know. So I'm familiar with some of the thing going on. So, but just a discussion, get Carnegie Mellon here or get Cornell to open up an offshoot for an executive program. So it creates the sparks, right? So venture capital. Does Oakland have a lot of venture capital? Anybody?
There are 2 groups in Berkeley I know about. but not
But Oakland?
Other than Mitch Capor.
So I know of, like Danny's started the Power Hive, right? This S Fund, So these are incubators. And, we've got a whole bunch of active venture capitalists here. So another thing we want to do is a little bit more venture capital. Support capital, great place to live. I like it better than San Francisco. Easy to park, easy to get around, right? I love Jack London Square. Better weather, right? So from a support standpoint, Oakland has an edge on San Francisco. This is my humble opinion, and I'm known to be wrong every day. So support capital, right? What do we do? And culture, right? The ambition to start up, or the desire to start up, do startups, innovation, ideas, right? So once you have those ecosystems, the IC, then you get the, IC and CC are very closely interlinked, right? Because you would agree? Yeah. So, but you got fantastic Mills College and what's the other school? Peralta Community College. So we're working with them to get a few solar charging stations with the e-bikes. In fact, we've talked to Savlan and Matt if there's a way we can put 50 charging stations, solar charging stations with e-bikes. 50. I mean, anything to be purposeful and to make a statement has to be large, right? And we have a business model where we can provide them at no cost, right? So just imagine if Oakland provides us 50 locations, we can put overnight, and I mean overnight because we don't need construction, we don't need infrastructure support. We can roll these babies in, these solar charging stations, with electric scooters and electric vehicles, and provide them to Oakland and create a hustle bustle. So I am working with the 48 BART stations to provide our bikes, but we are in discussions to put these solar charging stations outside where people can use them, right? Rather than store and, travel with your bike, it's point of use. Just get out, you got a bike, $1 an hour, just go do your work and come back. I mean, that's the future. Now the next wave here is the EV, PV renaissance, right? I mean, you saw just recently Tesla, right? I mean, could you imagine we would book 300,000 cars, right, in 3 days? And that's happened. Right? It's mind-boggling. I mean, I think BMW and Mercedes are going to get a run for their money. And rightfully so. This is, we have the 4 strategic weapons. IC, VC, SCCC. Germany doesn't have them. Right? So, any more, or can I shut up?
That's great. So let me ask you just a quick follow-up, and then we'll hear from someone else. So you mentioned you're doing manufacturing in Detroit. I assume that's sufficient for what you need, but under what conditions would you consider doing manufacturing, either in Oakland or in the Bay Area?
So we have actually talked to Mayor Libby Chef. We are very interested in putting a manufacturing facility here, close, because I don't know if you know, logistics costs are tremendous when you're talking a low-cost product. Our electric vehicle scooters cost $2,999, full aluminum frame, a 1,500-watt battery motor, frickin' 1.6 kilowatt battery, right? For $2,900, cheaper than a bike. 3-year warranty. You replace the battery in it, you got a brand new computer or brand new vehicle, right? It's all aluminum, made in US, we can make it here. Save a lot of money, local deployment, absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll maybe come back to that and hear a little bit more about what it would take and what part of Oakland. Steve, Jeff? Jim, Jeff. Jeff. I said Jeff, that's right. No, Steve, Jeff. You want to take it away? Tell your story, the founding story. Why are you here? And a little bit, what's the company you do? You run.
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about what we do first.
And I think try to talk, Olive, I think we need to talk into this or else the video
a
won't
little
hear
bit.
it very well.
How's that? All right, so if you were to order a Lego set online anywhere in North America right now, it would be picked out of a system we built here in Oakland. Since the system went live, I think we've selected some number of millions of Lego sets out of a 1 million square foot facility in Memphis, Tennessee, near the FedEx hub. And all those electronics were designed and manufactured in Oakland, just a few blocks from here. I am a capitalist. My goal is to make money. The world has a different idea about that. So, I don't have this sort of nature about me that, I want to do good things, I want to make money. And so I'm always trying to make smart decisions about how to spend money. And being in Oakland fits our model because we consider ourselves a manufacturer of low volume, high value goods. And all of our vendors are here in Oakland. All of our employees are, well, most of our employees are here in Oakland. And the reason why that makes sense, instead of following a pretty traditional model of getting things made in Shenzhen, is that we also have a process that we call zero diff. So everything that we design in our shop is committed, both hardware and software, to GitHub, and all those commits could be tagged and made CMS ready. And as a result of that, anything that we prototype is also production ready. And we typically have very, very short cycle times. Like right now, I was on a flight back from Chicago last week, and I was finishing up a board control design. We're now building robots over there as well. I was finishing up a motor control board design from the airplane, committed it to GitHub in the morning. It was in my desk, and we make that in Oakland, and that's a fully ready to go board. Adam Goldenberg and Erwin Gonzalez, who bought Old Oakland, are our landlord, and we have embarked on an effort to show people how we do this. So we just this week opened a new fab facility that's in the breezeway between 8th and 9th Street behind the Trappist. And it's very cool, and we keep the door open. That's part of the deal. So I invite you all to come see how we're doing this. The people in that room trained at the Laney College program. Many people are not aware of this program. It's very interesting. It takes a wide, diverse range of people, both in age and social class and a number of things, and they run through the program, and then they're quite skilled to do a lot of things. They're in high demand at Tesla, they're in high demand at Google and Apple, but then they have to leave Oakland to get those jobs. And basically, having seen it firsthand, there's a pretty significant conversion in their lives because they make significantly more money after having gone through that program. And, I don't know if any of you read Frank Bernay in the New York Times, but he says, look, we have this idea of college, and, it's going on right now with this person who got into all Ivies and so forth, but that's actually a very, very small percentage of where people really get trained. Most people get trained in community colleges. And so while I think it's great to have a major university, I think it's better to have Laney College. So I'm always trying to figure out, well, how can I piece these things together to make money, but at the same time have a nice place where I would like to work? And that's the model that we're following over in Oakland. I want to add something too, which is, I don't want to make too much of a claim to this because the scales are very different, but our gross margins are higher than Apple's. So I don't believe for a second that you have to go to China to make something. You can, I'm not saying that's wrong, and there's a certain scale you have to because you just need the volume. There just isn't capacity to move enough material here. I don't know if that's why I'm in Oakland. I think I built my business in Oakland because I started my career in Oakland right after the earthquake. So it was pretty wrecked. I mean, City Hall was not even occupiable when I started working in Oakland.
Well, just as a quick question, so you said you're a low volume, high value business. Let's say your scale grew dramatically and the orders were coming in. Could you scale up here? And if not, what would it take for this to be the kind of place where you could scale up?
I believe that we can get to, in the facility we're in right now, 10,000 units a month.
How
which
much,
is
2,000?
10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, so which is higher than what we need.
And how many are you now?
A couple of thousand, yeah. We're not going to reach that scale. That's just not the business we're building. So we don't have that constraint. But I can tell you, sort of, kind of a, boy, I have to be really careful because I don't want to disparage anyone. But
And I think this is being recorded. So
yeah, one
Be careful what you say.
one of the struggles that people have when they go to build something, maybe they get crowdfunded or whatever, is that they build what's called, this is a pretty typical model, they build a looks like prototype. And then they show it to people and they're like, oh, wow, this is great, let's build some. And then what they don't realize is to make a version of that you can actually manufacture is probably harder than getting to that looks like prototype. And so to get the value of that low cost of scale, you have to spend an enormous amount of tooling and spool up money to get to that point. And when you look at why a lot of these sort of crowdfunded projects are failing, oftentimes they can't get through that problem. The coolest cooler is the latest sort of poster child of this. And I really want those guys to be successful. I mean, that really matters to me. So part of the reason why we have this shop, the Zero Diff thing, is to show people that there is a different way, that you can go. So this is the way I was heard. Someone described this, and this is brilliant. We know how to go from 0 to 1, and we know how to go from 10 to 100, but we don't know how to go from 1 to 10. And in my opinion, Oakland is a go from 1 to 10 city.
Well, that's great. One other follow-up question before we hear from Steve, and something for actually all three of you to think about, I'm going to ask later, which has to do with, is there a role in Oakland or elsewhere in the Bay Area for something that's kind of contract manufacturing, having entities that can allow, the startups can be here, the prototyping, but they're more specializing in scaling it up? Now,
Yeah, absolutely.
it depends radically on the industry.
Yeah, so one of the things we do, we don't do any molding or stamping anymore. So and almost everything we do is a kind of an origami. So all of our products are folded in wood, plastic, and steel now. And you know, at first they were pretty ugly, but we're getting really good at it. And we believe that if we keep going with this, we're going to be able to build beautiful products. And some of our products have lead times of 2 days as a result of this. So we can get them water jet cut at 2 different vendors in Oakland. We can get them laser jet cut from a vendor in Oakland. There's no CMS that we know of that we can work with in Oakland, so we go one
Would you tell
county.
people what CMS is?
Contract manufacturer. So they'll stuff the boards for us. So they'll make the fabs and put the materials on the board. But everything else we can do here, and we do the assembly in our shop.
So one other follow-up question before hearing from Steve, which is, you mentioned to me before we started that your vendors are here now, which is great, but they may not be here in the future. Why not?
Yeah, that's a real concern for me. I don't have any data other than just watching the trades get slowly erased from the surface of the downtown Oakland corridor. So I have some worries about that, you know, and I know that there's some stuff going on in West Oakland, and you know, and there's a whole maker thing in innovation space. I got to tell you, we heard from VCs, by the way, want to be in San Francisco, even though their offices are down there. Almost all their meetings in San Francisco now, so it's really easy to get over there. But we're talking to some guy, super intelligent person, and the idea of innovation spaces came out, and he's like, oh man, kiss of death. And I kind of get it. I mean, there's a difference between the sort of hobbyist, and they're in a little stall and they're doing a thing, and an actual business. They're very different things. And so the idea that you're going to have a building with a bunch of little stalls and an innovation space and tools to rent doesn't seem like someone who's building a business to me. It seems like maybe someone who's kind of being an advanced hobbyist. Maybe a business emerges from that, but do we really want a model where in order to be in business, I have to own a business, which is a really heartbreaking thing to do, as you guys can attest. So.
Well, that's great. Well, we can bring that up about a little bit later about the kind of broader ecosystem. A lot more we can go into with both the first guys, but yeah, Steve, tell us. Well, first of all, thank you. I think we're all enjoying it, but tell us, yeah, what's your story? Why are you here? And maybe to pick up from it, I mean, obviously your grapes probably aren't coming from here in Oakland, but if you could just say a little bit about the supply chain for the work that you're doing and what you benefit from Oakland.
Okay. I think the first thing I should point out is it's a good thing I'm on this side of the room because I'm at the opposite scale of sort of where you folks have been down there, as I said beforehand, you know, I'm Steve Schaefer and I'm a serial entrepreneur, so sort of like an AA meeting. But Urban Legend is a micro-scale winery by most winery standards. We're a nanoscale winery. We're somewhere in the 10 range, if you will. And it's a small business. My wife and I started it. We wanted to do a startup together, and here we are. Why did we do it here? As you said, grape supply is pretty short in Oakland. There are actually 2 commercial vineyards within the city limits. both up on the hills. Bishop's Vineyard, who's in Alameda, actually makes wine from those vineyards. So the main reason that we're here in Oakland is we've lived in the East Bay for 20 years, and Oakland was the right city of all of the East Bay simply because this is a place where you can bring your dreams to life. There are a lot fewer barriers to starting something here. I think the art scene kind of tells you that. There are very few things in your way. There are lots of people to cheer you on, particularly when you're doing something small and artisan, the way we are. You asked about my supply chain and my logistics. Believe it or not, this is probably one of the best places in the country to put a winery. Oakland has for many decades been a hub for food manufacturing and processing. Most of the tools that we use, most of the infrastructure is actually readily available here. I can literally walk down to my chemical supplier, Cal Soda's down here at 5th and Mandela. So they supply me with all the cleaning supplies. They supply most of the wineries up in Napa and Sonoma. The simple things like hoses and fittings, which are very specialized in my industry. I go down to East Oakland and go into one or two suppliers and walk out with those things. My friends up in Napa and Sonoma are waiting weeks to get parts. So that way, it's a much better place for me to do business. The base infrastructure, things like power, water, gas, are readily available. So it's very easy to start that kind of business. And the other major thing with what we do, because we're really about sort of a one-to-one connection. We're a direct consumer customer company. So we're in a place where we're really close to our consumers. Our neighbors are the people that are giving us feedback every day. And that direct contact, I think, is key to what we do. Also, in some sense, being in Oakland has an advantage both if you're doing a high-tech company and if you're doing a winery, in that you're out of the groupthink area. I know while I was working in Fremont and Sunnyvale and Santa Clara, you're constantly running into people who are doing almost the same thing you are. And that thinking different really helps. And I think that's part of the tremendous value of Oakland and that neighborhood, and the fact that people are really here willing and cheering you on to try something different.
Are there any limitations for you to scale up where you are right now?
Oh, yes. Of course, I like most of the other people that are renting space are really feeling the crunch, and I believe this is probably what led Savlon to invite me here. Currently, our winery is about 2,200 square feet out of the 4,600 square feet that we rent there. We now have 300 barrels in there that are taking up 1,900 out of the 2,200 square feet. 2 years ago, we really should have doubled that number. Unlike these gentlemen that are worried about 14 or 15 turns of inventory a year, my inventory turns in 18 to 24 months. So I need a tremendous amount of space that sits there, and all the magic happens while it's sitting in the barrel, but it takes a long time. So getting space at a reasonable cost is one of our primary considerations. We are in the process of looking for a new production space. When we move out of this space, we have wonderful landlords. I dearly love Metrovation, but they will turn that space around for more than double what I'm paying for it. And that's just a factor of what's happening in the economy here.
Would you, if you move, do you think you'll be able to stay in the neighborhood?
In Jack London, no. Jack London is now priced out of what's reasonable. For somebody who wants to build a mid-priced wine, if you will, a mid-premium wine, something in the $20 to $30 range, I can't afford Jack London anymore. My friends down at the down on Oak Street at 4th and Oak, Dash Cellars, were very fortunate. They renewed their lease 2 years ago, just as the astronomical climb started, and they can stay in business here for another 10 years. But I would question whether they're going to be really able to afford it beyond that point.
Well, I want to get into a number of things that you talked about and kind of bring all of us into it. I mean, you talked a bunch about vendors. You have these great vendors that you can get locally. You mentioned that as well. You talked a little bit about this. I'd love to get that, but let's just pick up on real estate for just a moment. Could both of you kind of address, is the space you're in an issue? Do you see that being an issue going forward, either for yourself or for companies that you're working with? You're not right here in Jack London. You're further up Broadway.
Yeah,
It's in Old Oakland.
we're on the just
Right.
other side of the freeway, not Oakland.
But is the cost of space for either your company or the companies you're working with, is that looking forward the next 3-4 years
Well,
potentially a major issue for them?
we caught the cycle fortunate, so it's not something that I worry too much about. But I totally get what you guys are up against. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to go back and change my previous answer about why I'm in Oakland. I kind of want to offer that, like, one thing that I don't think a lot of people really, maybe they do, I just don't. I was thinking as you were talking, wow, part of the reason why I like having a business in Oakland is there's a winery there, and Kapoor Center is there, and BART is there, and so it's like, it's not, I mean, what city in the world has those four things, the high-tech, BART, and the Kapoor Center, like none almost, right? Maybe New York has some area that's like that, but very, very few cities
The
have
wine's
that.
not as good, though.
What?
The wine's not as good in New York.
Yeah, exactly. No, I worry about that, land use is a big problem. And, I don't envy you guys, having to take on something that hasn't been touched for, what'd you say, 40,
I think
47
1960,
years?
isn't that right? Savlan, Mark, correct me? I mean, I think the underlying zoning in Jack London, I was with the planning department a couple of days ago, and they showed the zoning for the rest of downtown Oakland, but Jack London was sort of blank. And I said, well, what's the zoning? Well, we're going to do it over.
Let's just say I'm glad that's not my job.
This area right here was rezoned just about 10 years ago.
Where?
And then this particular
Okay.
neighborhood in West.
Okay.
Yeah, the other side of the street, I think you have one.
1999, and that covers everything within a few hundred yards of the estuary.
So it's really sad that we don't have that information and we're looking at something from 1960s. A lot of people have been saying, remember this city, remember this numbers.
Well, I think, but I think the question, so okay, well, let's get into a planning question. Just what could be, thinking about the land, the real estate costs for others, thinking about the viability of the businesses you're in, is there something that would make the surrounding area more viable for businesses over time? And I'll just offer a couple thoughts and then open it up, and then want to open it up to you all, of course, for the conversation in just a moment. That in a lot of places, areas that are viable industrial areas, south of Market in San Francisco for many years at a range of industry, part of what challenges it is both real estate costs, but sometimes the incursion of other uses that are not compatible with the kind of uses that are there. Typically, it's residential, and residents move in, complain about truck traffic, complain about other things, and those conflicts then lead to other changes that make it harder for businesses to remain. Now, some of you are in businesses that are compatible with residents. I would say yours probably is. Yours certainly is. Yours is as well, but some of your vendors may or may not be. And oftentimes, the allowing residential can go in, it drives up the underlying price of land and rent, and so that then becomes a harder factor for industrial uses. So that's one of the arguments for saying, here's an area we're not going to allow any residential to go in. It's one way of keeping the prices a little bit more competitive for industrial uses. So just thinking forward, as the city is considering the zoning process, should there be a chunk of Jack London that really where they don't allow residential, or they really try to promote kind of maintaining and growing industry? That's been a question.
Well, maybe they should stop doing that thing you just said. Like, businesses are over here and residences are over there.
Okay,
Like,
say
why
what?
isn't there,
Say
why
what?
isn't there a 10-story building where the bottom floor is, you know, a grocery store and the bottom 4 floors are light-duty manufacturing and the top 10 floors are condos?
Yeah, we certainly don't behave like Hong Kong, where you find that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Hong Kong, but it's an amazing place. I remember the first time I went through when we were driving to the hotel, and you look up in the 6th story of this high-rise building, and there is a major printing press on the 6th story, and I think 7th story or 8th story was a manufacturing location. I'd say one of the things I would encourage is, I think in the U.S. we will continue to segregate residential and light industrial because we just aren't quite at that density yet. But when they zone areas like this, the city needs to consider not to set the industrial area in as a desert. Run bike paths through it. Have your parks, your exercise areas that you're going to, the amenities that you expect with a residential area, more in there. If you go over here, just head down 3rd Street, you go down to the part, the area around the port and where Svenhard's is, that's a desert. You go out further into West Oakland where, you know, where all the port buildings are, even if you, as you go up in the mixed areas, up Adeline and Market, there are a lot of those areas that are strictly industrial and they become deserts, and the community dies there. And I think if you're going to do that, what you need to do here in Jack London is to make sure that the industrial is part of the community. It's not a separate island. It's not an, you know, it's not a tilt-up town like you find down in Fremont. And yes, maybe you do integrate housing around the edges of it.
Well, let me share something. So my wife and I have this grand plan for when the kids are out. We're in a West County school district, and when we're out of that, when they're out of school, what we really want, we're not going to get it, but what we really want is we want to live in a building in Oakland down here where the business is in that building and there's a coffee shop on the ground floor. And who doesn't want to wake up, go downstairs and get coffee, hang out, and then go upstairs and go to work and not have to be in your car? And what if those are like good paying jobs? I mean, who doesn't want that? I mean, why are we like making people move like that every single day? I don't get it.
Well, no, it's a great vision, and it's something we to think about. Is that possible? The challenge that happens in the U.S. context, or at least in the Bay Area in particular, is that residential is able to pay so much per square foot that it can squeeze out other uses, and that residents often can be people that try to will complain about if they hear a printing press 2 floors above them or other things. I mean, so there is a possibility we could get to that in the future, but the moment we're in right now, people are not as open to it.
Yeah, but so let them move to Walnut Creek. I mean, for the people who want that kind of, who want to hear a printing press, let's have there be a city for that, right?
All right. Well, let's I was going to hear from you, but let's open it up, get some questions. One of you start. Yeah.
Start using a different kind of model when you finance these projects. And that's really where it's in the economics and the planning department really need to change their mindset, because the population's ready. The population's completely ready.
Mm-hmm. And to add to what Jim is saying, I mean, you just look at a lot of models that have been in place for hundreds of years in Europe, I don't know Hong Kong, but you have mixed use, and as you say, who doesn't want to have that? All the people that I talk to in this community understand that we're here because we see the potential of not the subway, the suburb commute, bedtime, what do you call that? I'm sorry, but I come from urban stuff, and I'm trying hard in seeing this area to be what it can be of urban, of the mixed use of the real estate and residential coexisting And it's here, it's in place, it's possible. If it's being squeezed out by ignorance, that's what we're fighting against. And I think that this event tonight, I think at least a lot of us are interested in saying, where's the light industrial being shoved out? Let's make sure it doesn't get shoved out, because the residential can coexist with it easily and should. And you were talking about the deserts of industrial. It's so unnecessary. You know, West Oakland has an amazing community of people, and then they've been shoved into little corners. But again, Jack London District has all the bones in place. Let's make sure that they're not broken.
So let's hear, so,
Go ahead, let's move on.
well, do you want to ask, I mean, I think it's a fair point.
I have one more comment on this same theme, which is that this area is zoned in a way so that the Broadway corridor is designed as an entertainment area. As you move west, it's mixed use, which means more housing can be built, but there will be retail and light industry amongst it. And Steve's points were especially well taken. If we integrate the light industry into the community with paths and parks, pedestrian and bicycle-friendly modes of transportation, as the new specific plan for downtown through Jack London is recommending for a lot of places, then we get people in the right places so that we save a lot of environmental cost, because people can walk and bike conveniently to work. We save a lot of logistical costs because the port and the railroad are right here. So when you're shipping your goods, it's really easy. This integration of the plan, like CK and June were saying, is really the modern way. And the fact that it's become difficult and that we allow housing to crowd out light industrial is sort of the old way of thinking about it. And we are poised to serve as a model for the right way to do it. And all these folks up here who are making things and selling things in the Jack London, and as well as all the folks who live in Jack London, are collaboratively building the new community. And we're a model for the world. You know, they're writing about us in the New York Times, which is, I hear, an important paper.
Well, let's see if there's some other questions. Yes.
Industrial, these uniquely industrial areas being deserts because they're deserts of people. There's plenty of activity there. There's industry happening. What's not there are people in numbers, because nobody lives there, because offices with density aren't there, because retail isn't there. Putting bike paths in parks ain't going to make it better.
Well, it depends on how you surround it. And just to stand back for a second, I don't think you really want my winery 2 floors down from where you're living. Let's face it, I'm probably one of the this is one of the greenest industries out there, right? But there are some things you should know. We end up running 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning for about 3 months of the year. So I'm making noise down there. There are other things where I really don't want you above me, to be honest. I use a thing called sulfur dioxide gas in here. Once a month, we go in and we gas our barrels with this. It's a nasty, toxic chemical. I wish I didn't have it, but I do. And I don't want people living above me who have that. Almost all industry has some of those things. I agree. Yeah, the reason that at 6 o'clock at night you go drive down to Nell's down there or walk down to Nell's, nobody else is around because those factories have shut down for the day. If that becomes a place where you could go for recreation in the off hours, I think it would make sense. Not if it's just tilt-up buildings. No, it's not a desirable place to go recreate. There is the CrossFit gym down in the corner of Third and Mandela. Maybe, that's the kind of thing you can go in for. Yeah, agree. And you have to surround it. And that I agree about, yeah. No, and believe me, the comment is that there are residential properties close to me, and I love that. I mean, that is one of the keys why we will always have at least a public presence in Jack London for the foreseeable future until retail gets out of hand, which I hope it never does. And I think you're absolutely right. There need to be people surrounding it. It needs to be done in Ben's comment about, we were talking beforehand about having these little patchworks where the industry is, I think is a much better idea than integrating it all in one. There needs to be a reason to be around it and for it not to be a desert. You're absolutely right. I think from the zoning perspective, one of the things to be very careful of is zoning it so that it's residential and industrial. And almost every time I've seen that, in the last 2 years, we've been looking for production space, so I've been looking a lot in West Berkeley and Emeryville, some in Alameda, but Berkeley, I think, has got a lot of that right, where they've said there's this 4 or 6 block area, nobody can live there. That's an industrial area. We'll surround it with apartment buildings, or we'll allow it to be mixed use. The problem, of course, has been stated before, the problem is when you have industrial and residential areas, the value of the residential area for somebody who's going to sell that land is much higher. The space around the corner from Ben and CK's house, that property went on sale for a year and a half ago. Was that when 380 was on sale? And that area was a huge amount of interest in it because everybody thought they'd tear the warehouse down and build condos in it. Fortunately, there was a bit of there was a housing density that made it low enough that it stayed in industrial use. And you've got to be very careful about that. And I think that's the mixed use model, unfortunately, tends to go residential over time. I think we want to think about that.
Is anyone from Fathom still here? No? Is anyone from Fathom still here?
No, I think they had to take off, but we can relay questions to them. And this
No.
is being recorded, so.
No, but I was just wanting, I guess what I was getting at is not all businesses are the same. Some businesses, might have impacts, right? And others have impacts they can mitigate, and some have very low impacts, right?
As Fathom's neighbor, and I love those guys, and I love what they do, but I would not want to live above Fathom either, with some of the processes they're using. I mean, they do, there's a lot of hot smell of plastic odor and aluminum foundries.
So, just a little from an outsider's perspective, right? I don't live in Oakland. I don't know the zones. I'm completely numb to all this. But, if you know Michael Porter, the strategist, says, how can you differentiate Oakland from the rest? Right? And there are plenty of pieces here to differentiate. You've got great ocean front here. You got hilly. It's like San Francisco. It's better living, better climate than Fremont. Right? If Tesla can build something in Fremont, this, to me, this is the buzz amongst our friends as we talk and, social circles. Oakland is, a location waiting to just skyrocket. The residential prices have doubled for a lot of my friends, right? The values of homes, etc. But it's got all the ingredients, right? And the key is, how does the city create value, competitive advantage with respect to the other locations, right? And the other locations here are flourishing. I mean, imagine Cupertino, you can't get a 1,200 square foot home for 2 million, right? And here, I'm sure you can do at least twice as good as that. So
Well,
there's
and a
plenty.
diversity of uses over time, over a long period. Well, let's see if there's any other questions from the audience right now. Let me ask a question about the kind of infrastructure of organizations. So that a lot of what you're talking about, the companies you're in, is not always very visible to the people in cities, the people making policy decisions. And in other places in New York, San Francisco has this too, that there's an organization of manufacturers, New York Made, SF Made, that's really elevated the role of manufacturing within the economy, had an impact on local policy. I know there are people in the city of Oakland have been really working on this, but do you feel that the work that you're doing, the issues that not only do the companies talk to each other enough, or do they talk to each other enough in an organized way, and do you have enough visibility in the local policy space? And if not, is that something that's needed? And certainly having having a Jack London Improvement District.
I kind of have a
people
dark
together.
perspective on this. So problem one is not many of us left, so there isn't really enough rabble-rousers to get it going. So that's the first problem. The second problem is, like, I'm like at my office, like, zillion hours, right? I don't have time to go meet with people and figure stuff out. Meanwhile, developers who can turn residential properties really quickly, which means they can turn their capital over really quickly, they have all the time in the world to get down to City Hall and pull on the strings. We don't stand a chance. I mean, the idea that we're going to organize and sort of save ourselves is not going to work. I mean, we could say it will, but it won't work.
I will say my experience, of course, has been fairly different because the wineries here, by the way, if you don't know it, Oakland is the densest urban wine scene in the country and has been for almost a decade now. And we 3 years ago organized the Oakland Wine Trail as sort of a grassroots amongst us kind of thing, and started talking with the Oakland Convention and Visitors Bureau at that point, and they since have sort of adopted us and taken it much, much farther than we ever could have as individuals. So there is, and I would say, I would encourage you on the sort of the high-tech manufacturing side, I think there are enough businesses here that at least getting a little bit of mind share and then allowing the city to see if they can come in and dip and help. And I absolutely agree with you, though. We're very busy trying to move our businesses forward, and so unless there's something with a really high return, I don't think you're going to get much mind share from any one sector. In our case, we had a very high return project, and now Oakland is actually becoming nationally known as a wine touring center. So, fly into Oakland, you don't have to go north, kind of thing.
Well, and there's a long history, of course, of food manufacturing and kind of that, and that builds on itself.
But let's walk through the economics of the rent situation you have, right? So, so if you looked at it formulaically, there's some millions of square feet of light industrial that you would have to manufacture in this corridor to change that, right? So where's that going to go? Who's going to push that? Like, the rents don't rise and fall magically. They rise and fall relative to demand and who's pushing and who's tugging and who's got whose ear.
Well, but they also being pushed by, in a sense, if there are certain uses that can pay a lot more per square foot than others. And so one of the tools in a planning process, you can say, well, we recognize these uses are not as competitive. We will try to come up with a policy.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that fully. They may turn more dollars per unit time in a short period of time, but the overall economic activity through time is not even close to the same.
Sure.
Right, and that's where governmental policies really should come into
Exactly.
play. And I think, I'm slitting my own throat, but one of the things that Oakland has an abundance of, and Jack London has an abundance of, is what you're sitting in now, is a really cool rustic place to go do a high-tech business. I mean, that's one of the problems with where we're situated. It looks very much like this, and so it's very valuable as a place to start a high-tech company or to build it. And there, yes, you want to zone for less residential or a lower density residential to encourage that kind of business. And you may want to restrict the zoning to prevent your medium and heavy industrial business.
But I think what you're pointing out is not to get too zoning wonky about it, but the definition of office. And other cities in the Bay Area have gone through this and gotten really kind of these absurd, abstract conversations of, well, it can't be manufacturing, even if it's a digital animation firm, they have to actually be physically making it with clay on part of the table, but if they're just looking at computers, that's office. And you get into these fine distinctions, but the distinctions on some level start to matter, because if you could pack 300 people into a space like this, their ability to pay price per square foot is going to dwarf even an incredibly high-valued company thinking long-term over the economy. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, these are the decisions that a city is going to make. Will they say this kind of use is here? A vision of a mixed-use area is absolutely what should happen. And we should identify developers that will build multi-story buildings that can have that kind of use. But there are some economic concerns with the rent side that become.
But rents, like, not rents like what you pay, but rent seeking, the economic thing, is not really creating value. Okay, when Obama says, "Hey, I support community colleges," it's not abstract. He's talking about Laney, because that's where most people who want to go from not being in the middle class to being in the middle class will find that path, right? But then where do they go after they finish at Laney? If we want them to work in Oakland, then we got to create jobs in Oakland, right? So, I mean, right now they're going down to Google, or going down to Tesla, or they're going to some other city. And, so if you're talking about creating real economic value, maybe at some point we need to start thinking, well, really it's the 10-year time frame, and it's really, hey, let's call rent seeking, and let's talk about economic value creation, and then sort of level these out and sort of decide how we're going to pursue it.
Well, no, and I think so part of it, what seems that part of that is also raising the visibility of the businesses you're in and explaining the value over time. And the tough thing for entrepreneurs is you're busy running your company.
I feel like I elected someone to do that.
Well, that's...
Oh, I have a question, actually.
Yes.
And you're talking a lot about visibility, and I can say with the outreach that the district did to get people here, there's a lot of industry that's not here because they're busy, because right now actually is the beginning of their business day. Our produce district is a huge industry in Jack London, and there was a lot of industry interest in this talk, and I will be sharing this video with the operators that I spoke with. So increasing visibility is sort of a double-edged sword. Because of some of the sort of externalities of industry, I think people involved in industry are reluctant to make themselves more visible, because there's some fear that people will complain, or there's some that they may encounter roadblocks that they wouldn't ordinarily have if they try to maintain themselves under the radar. However, we're becoming increasingly dense. More people than ever are wanting to be here, live here, work here, play here. So we're kind of at a tipping point where we are going to, the industry here is going to be visible, and so we either need to embrace it or figure out a way to make it help it be a more compatible neighbor. So I guess my question is, do you think that people's tolerance will raise, or that we should encourage residential developers to have their prospective tenants, sign a no whining clause, WHI, not wine, not
yes,
not
please,
the one we're drinking.
Not WIN.
Do you think that's the sort of the future here, that people are just going to have to raise their tolerances for having a more mix of uses and
Well, the other thing, of course, is to help that industry become more compatible with the area. Let's face it, I know I've driven through the produce district at 10 o'clock in the morning, or attempted to navigate 3rd Street, and it was fine when that was all warehouses down there, and now there are a lot of people commuting through it. So maybe the question is, what can we do to make their infrastructure work more compatibly. You know, can we create loading areas and loading docks where you can get through and we aren't parked 5 deep trying to go through that area? So I think you're never going to get the no whining clause, personally. I know when I'm fermenting out here and the stems are out there, if I've left them more than 48 hours, I usually get 2 or 3 people who will walk in and say, "Are you making vinegar in here?" You know, and which is why we have almost daily pickups during harvest season. But trying to make the infrastructure work for that. By the way, the green waste ordinance, the changes in the green waste plan certainly didn't help that. My waste cost this year went up by a factor of 15 to remove for my compost.
Our waste management person was just here.
Yeah. So that was a rude shock. Yes, the wine prices will be going up to reflect it.
Others from you too about that issue? Yeah, visibility with them. Other questions from the audience? Yeah. Sure. Yes.
Try to speak into it. It's a question about San Francisco, the industrial area by 3rd Street, Bayshore. I fabricate. I use CNC router mill bits. And the situation has gotten so bad where I can only get these bits either from Amazon, which I like to see my bits, so I have to go all the way to Concord, or I can go to Bayshore to the one place that's still standing, and they're about to leave. And although that area is zoned as industrial, they're all facing incredible rent increases. A lot of the mill bit suppliers, a lot of the woodworking people have left. So we keep talking about, you know, I'm very sustainable. I'm all into solar panels. I love technology, but I'm also aware that we still have to make stuff. And the people who supply the bits and pieces that we need when we make things have left and are leaving fast. And I like having Marcus here, and I don't know if they own their building, but I'd like to be able to have others like Marcus. And so what is your suggestion to Oakland, given that you have seen what San Francisco did and the impact?
Well, so one of the things that San Francisco did, and I think a lot of cities do this, is there used to be mixed-use zoning that would allow industrial uses all over the city. Bakeries on Commercial Street, auto repair shops on commercial streets. Bit by bit, cities have gone through into neighborhood zoning that makes those uses grandfathered in, but not allowed over time. And so over time, you get a contraction of the uses that are, quote, industrial. And industrial is a broad range of uses. But I think the stuff that's never going to leave essentially a city, auto repair shops. And they increasingly go to a smaller and smaller area that you've allowed for industrial. And so they push out some of the other uses that in theory would like to be there, but don't have to be there. And so they outcompete. And so what's happened in San Francisco is that supply of land has gotten incredibly constrained. Now, there's other factors in San Francisco which have to do with cost of labor or a lot of the employees not being there anymore because they can't afford to live in the city, and so it's difficult for them to come in. So there become labor issues, which we haven't talked about. I was going to raise that. So over time, a lot of those factors happen. So even if you zone an area and say no housing, just industrial, it doesn't mean per se, even within that boundary of what's allowed there, the prices can still rise.
So what's your suggestions to Oakland?
Well, I think the suggestion for Oakland, one of the things is actually to make sure that there's a significant amount of industrial land that really remains, to look at it holistically across the entire city and really have large swaths of contiguous area. I think one of the things we've seen is the making sure there's a lot of contiguous land next to each other, but, and I think this is going to be the tricky question, is there going to be, what do you do about density? And what I mean by that is, what do you do about allowing taller buildings to go in? Because there's an argument out there that keeping heights short will keep land cheap. And that's not necessarily true, because keeping buildings short, if demand is high, the prices are going to go up. So are there models that we can come up with where a new developer will come in, build a new building that will have industrial uses in it, maybe it could have housing, but maybe housing is on the other half of the parcel.
Work, live.
Work, live, those kinds of, but you can figure out a way to do it, and a trick could there be something where you have some kind of an inclusionary requirement for industrial use, right? Oakland has no inclusionary requirement for affordable housing. There's discussion about an impact fee, but there's at least one model going forward in San Francisco near Potrero Hill and kind of near Mission Bay, where there's going to be some ground floor industrial uses. But it's a very particular developer that's moving forward with that.
What's the use?
I don't remember the use, but I can put actually the SF Made, the San Francisco organization run by someone named Kate Sofas. They've thought a lot about this very specific question, and I think there could be a model or two. Jack London would be the fabulous place to try to find someone to let's come up with it, let's get someone to build things. But I think the challenge is if other parts of Oakland get rezoned to allow a lot of residential to go in what used to be industrial, that space just gets constrained. And it's not just Oakland, it's the entire East Bay. And so Oakland can't act as an island. So I would say that's one critical thing, is making sure citywide a lot of the area retains. But Salon, you had another question?
So one last question here.
Great.
Does that sound okay?
Please.
I would like to just share that I became a Jack London Square homeowner 25 years ago, and the only industries down here at that time were hookers and drug dealers, and so I fit right in. Anyway, what I would like to say is that I really have learned a lot from each one of you. You've been very insightful, and I thank you for your time.
Well, that's a lovely comment to end on. Well, may just let any parting comments from the panelists, final thoughts.
No, I mean, we're excited. We're moving forward, right? Oakland, I think it's easy to do business. We've got a great opportunity. There are wider roads. I mean, what we can do in Oakland, we cannot even imagine doing that in San Francisco or any other location. And the support we've got here is tremendous.
From my perspective, if the United States is in a manufacturing renaissance, which I believe is possibly real, I'm hoping it's real, it's going to be around things like robotics, biotech. I have a friend who makes a pair of laser tweezers that can lift an individual strand of DNA. That's in Emeryville. There's no place to do that in Oakland, right? Those kinds of industries where you're making low volume, high value products. And when you do something like that, you're not creating a bunch of service jobs, you're creating a bunch of sort of like creative jobs that are typically paying higher. And those people tend to want to live close to their work as well. So you're creating a different city if you embrace that, in my opinion. And think 1 to 10.
1 to 10 growing. See.
I think that's a perfect set of comments, because I think that is the future of the United States. We need to make things. I guess I will say Jack London is a pretty unique area because it does have this mix of housing and residential. And I think that's one of the things that the folks in the neighborhood here need to keep pushing on. And I thank you all for embracing industry in what is increasingly a residential neighborhood. I think there are some good ideas here. I think you need to talk to the folks in the city council and the planning areas and make sure they include the voice of the people who actually are here day in and day out.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for coming. I think we had a really interesting conversation. There's a whole lot of issues and tough questions going forward with rezoning issues for the competitiveness of individual companies. 3D printing, I guess it's going to come into this facility, which might transform how manufacturing works in our region. But just a kind of a closing thought, we've been talking about Jack London, we've been talking about Oakland. We're really a part of the East Bay and this broader ecosystem of the Bay Area. So the success of these areas is really about making the rules and the system work right on the ground here, but also how we connect to Silicon Valley and the ingredients that make these kinds of economic regions really viable. But thank you for your questions. You're interested in this. Thank you for the group to put this on. Let's give a round to the panel. I think, Steve, there's some more wine that people can have, right?
I hope I know where there's more.